You're listening to ADHD Support Talk. ADHD Support Talk is brought to you by addclasses.com. Visit www.addclasses.com to sign up for helpful online resources and events today. I want to welcome you back to ADHD Support Talk Radio. I am your co-host, Lynne Edris, and I am a productivity coach. So I empower professionals to take control of their time and their lives so that they can fulfill their potential and have more time and energy for what matters most to them. So I am a woman with ADHD myself, guys, so I get it. Been there, done that. And I do believe that every single one of you can have whatever version of success you want for yourself and the fulfillment that I know you're capable of having. So you can learn more about me and what I do and the programs and services I offer at www.coachingadvantages.com. And when you text the keyword hack, HACK, to 33777, I'll send you my 7 foolproof productivity hacks to help you add hours of free time to your weeks by investing just a few smart minutes each day. Well, I want to welcome James Ochoa. James is here with me today. In a moment, we're going to talk about, I think, a really important topic that is going to be helpful to a lot of our listeners. I want to welcome you, James. Tell our listeners a little bit about you and where they can learn more about you.
Thanks, Lynn. I appreciate that. As you said, I'm James Ochoa. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I practice in Austin, Texas. Very hot Austin, Texas at the moment. We have
I'm
a
quite
lot
sure.
of different, we all have lots of weather issues at the moment. But I've been practicing, this is my 34th year in dealing with ADHD. It's been 99% of my professional work, which could not have been the case. I would have ever guessed that 3 decades ago. But that's kind of what happens with ADHD, right? We stumble into something and it gets that much more interesting as we go. So I'm a professional counselor that works with diagnosis, that works with ongoing, what I call educational action-oriented approaches to not sitting on the sidelines, to really helping people identify how to best manage their unique brand of ADHD. I know you and I have a lot of that in concert, that someone really has to personalize how they work with this. You can have all the organizational books in the world, and you may not like any of those strategies because they're not the right color of pen or paper or whatever it is. It doesn't matter, but it's got to come from the inside out. So, but I'm very passionate about what I do in the ADHD spectrum. jamesochoa.com. You can find all my information. I do have a couple of podcasts out there myself. My podcasts are a radio narrative fiction theater. So it's a way to see ADHD live and kind of how to handle it. I do afterthoughts on that podcast on kind of how to handle certain ADHD issues and situations. Very funny podcast.
Very cool.
And it's a lot of fun. And then they have another one called Shiny Shorts, which looks at ADHD storms and emotional stress and kind of how to handle different things of the biggest storms that we can have. And there's some big storms. I'm sure you've heard of a few storms yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm still actively working. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask you where you want to jump in. Where would you like to start talking about, emotional distress, talking about mental distress?
Yeah, so here's the funny deal on the ADHD spectrum, because when I started in 1989, I talk about as a young counselor, and I was 27 at the time. I'm now 62. I think those add up somewhere in there. Yeah, that's six. That
sounds
62.
About right. Yeah,
it's about right. I worked with a 6-year-old who was hyperactive, horribly impulsive, threw chairs, bit kids, spit on kids.
Aww.
And we were focused on his behavior. It's horrible. Really, really cute kid. And as his reward games, we had a behavior modification program then, which was state of the art at that point. Okay, if we went back then, this was actually designed by University of California, Irvine, with James Swanson's group and Russell Barkley. And if anyone's been in the ADHD field, will know those names. But this is where we had the kids reflect on their own behavior, not only modifying their behavior, but it was a new way of doing things in 1989. Well, this child, for his reward, would get we play 100-card sort game, so there'd be 50 pairs, and here's this little 6-year-old, and he gets 40 to 45 pairs out of 50 every time I play him. Now, I'm 27, and I'm reasonably good at a memory game. But I asked him during when we're playing with him, I said, how are you doing this? He said, I take pictures. I mean, what do you mean you take pictures? He said, I take pictures of the cards. So here we have a 6-year-old, horribly hyperactive and impulsive, who's got a photographic memory,
Yeah.
very clear to me, but we're going to miss it.
Right.
And so as a young counselor, it opens up this chasm when it's like, something's off here. We're going to miss something very special about this kid. And we didn't have so many of the strategies we deal with now regarding neurological strengths and meditation and mindfulness. And this was very early on. And it was like, all we had was behavior modification and medication.
Right.
And they were helpful, but they weren't helpful enough. They didn't get people over the threshold. So as I went on in my career through the 90s and early 2000s, the aspect and the issue that wouldn't go away was the emotional and mental stress of the condition. So I could teach mindfulness, we could do trauma therapy work, we could do strategy work, we could educate them, we could get them on medication and stabilized. But I say I got to my position in understanding the emotional and mental stress of ADHD through an enormous amount of professional failure.
Yeah.
I couldn't meet my clients' needs, and it was horribly painful the first 15 years of my career. And I actually had 3 5-year-long ADHD adult groups that ended in kind of that pain cycle. We didn't know what else to do. And so that was the mid 2000, 2004, 2005 when I coined the term emotional distress syndrome, which is all the emotional and mental distress that spins off of the condition and that's disruptive. I see it and define it as a chronic low-grade post-traumatic stress that builds up. And as we say, a micro trauma is still a trauma. If you disorganize something, you forget an important appointment, you get fired from a job, it's going to activate all this history. And so what do you do about it? And that's really been the thrust of my career that I've really wanted to bring forward. Certainly in my book, Focus Forward, which focuses on the concept of the emotional and mental stress of ADD, kind of exposes and kind of talks about all that.
It's so important, James, that people understand that how did you say it? Micro trauma is still trauma. Like when a lot of us think of trauma as like a major life event, a tragedy or something that is traumatic. But when you have ADHD, like some of us spent years feeling daily little micro traumas. It's that falling short of your potential, not following through on your intentions, that whole, this is what I meant to do, and this is how I ended up showing up, being out of sync. It's crazy painful. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people really don't understand.
Yeah, they don't get that it doesn't go away. And certainly you, any of us who are diagnosed with ADHD, and I still have a moderate to severe condition of it. I still have 7 to 8 out of the 9 symptoms on both ends of the scale for the DSM-5. Closed head injury at 4, drug and alcohol recovery for 35 years, schizophrenia in my father's family. I got craziness all over the place, but it's like the reality is those things don't go away, and we want them to go away. But the reality is you can learn to manage and live within them. But if you don't start with a pragmatic reality that says, okay, wait a minute. Yes, you forgot your keys again in the house, and you broke, your favorite grandmother's lamp because you were so pissed off. And you didn't want to do it, but how many thousands of times had you forgotten your keys? And so these traumas build up, right? And if if you don't know how to reset and recenter and rebalance yourself, you're in a major storm. And that's why I came up with a metaphor of storm. It's like it makes total sense to me.
And it can be small things too, right? It's just the all day long. And you gave me like a little bit of a mini flashback, and I'm not sure how many years going back here, but I mean, not that many. That's okay. No, it's okay. It's good. Like 10 years, 15 years. I don't know. I'm 57, so I'm right behind you. But at a point in my life where I felt like I had my ADHD crap pretty well together in the grand scheme of things most days, right?
Right.
My husband and I were getting ready to go to a concert. The whatever, a friend who was the lead singer in the band. It was a big concert locally. He was kind enough to put me on his guest list. So I really wanted to make sure I showed up. And as I'm loading my stuff in the car and getting ready to go, I, of course, being a girl, I wanted to look nice in my, girly shoes, but I brought an extra pair of shoes for the ride home because I knew my feet would be killing me. I tucked my cell phone in one of those shoes as I was carrying crap out to the car, right? We're leaving kids at home, older teenagers, whatever. And I cannot find my cell phone. So I start freaking out, running around the house like a lunatic. And God bless my husband. We've been married for 35 years now. He just kind of disappeared. None of what I would have expected years ago, what are you doing? We're going to be late, all that stress stuff, because he gets anxious when we're late. And he was sitting down at the bar having a cocktail, just waiting for me, trying to be calm. And we got finally, I figured out where I kept calling the phone, saw my shoe light up in the backseat of the car, whatever. I don't know how many minutes went by, but I thanked him and I said, I really appreciate you not like losing your crap on me or coming down on me. And his response, like I just started crying. He said, I know that you were beating yourself up far harder than anything I would have said, and I didn't want to add to it.
Right.
He's right. I went back to that, who the hell do you think you are?
Right. Oh my God.
Little miss, you're not all that. You think you've got your stuff together and here we are, all that ugliness comes right back.
Oh yeah. And you have to monitor the shame cycle afterwards of how could I have forgotten I put it in the shoe? It was so simple. It was already in the car. I mean, it goes on. And so how do you begin to manage that stress and that kind of a pop? You first validate it, right? Like we're doing now. It's like, this is real.
Yeah.
It's funny because I have a similar flashback story of a year ago with a concert where I actually showed up I had free tickets for me and 6 other people, and I showed up on the wrong night. And it was the night before, and I had to beg and grovel the person I knew to give me tickets again. And it was like, and it lasted for 2 weeks, right? We just kill ourselves with those kind of things. So I think, candidly, I've been in the field forever, it feels like. I believe this is absolutely, beyond the shadow of a doubt, the most important issue to validate.
Yeah.
Because if people are living with it, and how many times do we disorganize, and it still goes on? I've been married 34 years, going on 35. I'm right with you. And to have a spouse that understands and says, okay, let's sit down and make a list. It's okay. Let's just look at this. I mean, that's just like gold. And
it is.
Because otherwise we're in some other la la land, you know? And as I was telling you before we got started, neither one of us has gotten a gold card yet. No one has said, okay, yours is fixed now because you're in the field, you treat it, you're okay. So I really think the resourcing piece, beyond the validation piece of what the storms are about, are critically important. And so the resourcing piece, right, whether it's micro meditations is what I call them now, are most successful in the ADD spectrum. 1 to 3 minute breaks throughout your day. Yes, you can ask a person with ADD to sit for 20 minutes if you want to torture them. And they're not trained to do it. I've sat for an hour or two now that I'm 13, 14 years into meditating in certain times and certain conditions. It is not. No, I can do a walking meditation,
Yep, absolutely. Floating on a raft, I can do it. But if you're going to tell me I have to sit on my backside and quietly and think and meditate, not only am I going to get myself, kind of freaked out at the prospect. It's the anxiety that knowing that I'm going to have to try to do this thing is going to bring up for me. I know it's going to be hard. So I'm a big fan of micro meditations.
Yeah. And one of my favorites is what I call 1 minute sun worship, which is you close your eyes if you're concerned about the sun and looking at the sun, even with your eyes closed, put on a pair of sunglasses, but you count 1001, 1002, 1003, up to 1060, which is about a minute long while you're deep breathing. 25 years later, I've been using that. That one never ceases to just reset kind of how I am. I
Yeah.
always tell people, if you see me in the middle of a parking lot staring at the sun, I'm not crazy. I know what I'm doing, and I don't care what people think of me anymore.
Right.
It's
Right.
like, there's that crazy guy over there. I'm like, it doesn't matter to me because I know what works. And once you know
Right.
what works, it
The
changes
reset.
things. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely it does. And
Yeah.
when you
It
can
does.
accept that it's okay,
Yeah.
right, to do what works,
Right.
and whether or not, you're making assumptions that people are going to think you're a wackadoo, you
Right.
you doing you, and you doing what works for you, and honoring that, and not
Yeah.
just like knowing that it's okay, but I'm not sure what the word is, James, but like really internalizing that it's not just okay, it's
Yes.
right.
Well, you're empowered. You're like,
Yes,
I know
yes,
what
that's the
works for
word.
me. And now
Yes,
comes the courage, right? You're like, no, I am not going to do it like this. I've done that 1,000 times. It doesn't work
right,
for me. You
right.
know, this does work for me. And someone says, well, that's really weird. You're like, weird to you, unique to me, and works really well. But
Right.
that's an empowered stance versus a
Yes.
shame. I got to hide it. Oh, I don't want to
Yes.
tell people about the
Yes.
qualifying. You're going to think this is weird, but it's like,
Right.
forget all that. Okay.
It's prefaced with, this is what works for me,
For me,
period. And we're not,
period.
what, no matter what you're talking about, a coping
Yes.
mechanism in the middle of,
Right.
needing a quick meditation or visualization or
Yes.
micro meditation or whatever, to the way you process your to-dos, to the way you get
Yes.
started on
Yes.
stuff, to the way you
Yes.
generate
Get through the
focus,
invisible wall.
any of
Right.
that
It's like
stuff.
any of it, any of it.
Right.
And it's unique. And about 2 summers ago, I stopped and started counting the strategies I use and resources I use. I stopped at like 75.
Yeah. I don't
They're
know
all,
that.
because once, well, but go about your life. I mean, if you
Yeah.
really you're managing your ADD, think about all the things you do to resource yourself that you
Yes.
don't
Oh,
even,
absolutely.
how we set up environments, how your
Yep.
office is set up behind you,
Mm-hmm.
where things, it's like, don't
Mm-hmm.
move it. It's there for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I tell people. No, no, don't move it. It's there. If it's messy or you got an issue with it, okay, we can negotiate something, but don't just pick up something that I
Right.
put somewhere because it was there for a reason.
Right. And I often work with my clients to understand why it works. Like what's the reason? Because at
Yes.
some point something's going to change, right? Whether
Yes.
your environment, your literal physical environment changes, or
Yes.
something about your schedule, or the rhythm
Right.
of your days or your life, or something that you're anchoring to, whether that you don't
Mhm.
realize you're
Yep.
anchoring to, that is a
Right.
resource for
Right.
you. It's
Right.
going to change. So how do you
Right.
make an adjustment so that,
Yes.
but first you have to identify, like
Right.
what has changed that has
Right.
thrown me off a little bit.
Exactly. And knowing that pattern, knowing that anchor statement is a really
Mm-hmm.
good point you bring up, Lynn,
Mm-hmm.
is so critical because you can many times use that anchor, right, in other places. You
Right.
start realizing, oh, it was the quietness. It was this that I
Right.
did. Oh, I could use it.
Right.
And that's where, this strategy jumping, right? We can put them in other places. But if you're not figuring out what the foundation is and pulling it apart for yourself,
Absolutely.
and a lot of times you've got to have this right with your clients, your folks you work with, is many people are so hesitant to tell you because they think it's weird or something like, okay, you're going to think
Right.
this. I'm like, no, there's nothing too weird here.
Yeah. I
Uh,
actually, I had a group call right before this, and one of the members said, I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud. I've never said this out loud to anyone before, but this is how I get started on emails.
right,
And I said,
right.
hang on one second. First of all, think about where you are,
Mm-hmm.
and also think about the fact that whether or not you realize, just probably everyone in this group has a difficult time
Yes,
composing lengthy emails. That's one
yes,
of the things I hear a lot about from my clients.
right,
So
right,
what you feel is weird and embarrassing that helps
right,
you could be like the golden seed or whatever
right,
that
right,
really helps somebody
right,
understand what's
right.
going to work for them. There is no,
Yes,
I
yes.
I really want my clients to not have shame around that stuff,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Oh, yes, I worked in an elementary school probably 2 decades ago, and we had strategy books in the classroom, not just for the kids with ADD, with everyone. And other kids that would come up with a strategy and someone else wanted to use it, and the kids were like, no, that's my strategy. I'm like, no, if your strategy gets used more often, it's more valuable.
Yes.
It's like we used to have these little tick marks, and someone used a strategy 15 times. It's like, look what you helped someone do.
Yeah.
And so that's a great courage in that group process to really say,
Yeah.
no, there's nothing too weird here.
Yeah.
Um, So the resourcing piece and the personalization piece and dialing in, if you're going to use medications or alternatives, because there's a lot of alternatives. I've really, gotten into resourcing and using anything from essential oils to breathing to cold water therapies now are the kind of the rage. I'm glad I got them to them 6 years ago, so I don't feel like I'm jumping on the bandwagon. But it was like they work. We're looking for things that give us that shiny kind of object in a way that's meaningful and functional, and we know what works for us again. Okay, it's a critical factor.
Absolutely.
The other topic I really wanted to bring up is the ongoing nature of these storms that don't go away. You and I will believe, okay, like I said, we did have a gold card, but it's like, why do these storms keep happening in my life? And I almost want to come up with a metaphor of like the ADHD weather patterns. It's like, it's a disorganization, there's a disorganization storm pattern flowing through here. It's like, it's partly disorganized today instead of partly cloudy,
Right. I love it.
It's like, because these patterns come and go. Now, the storms that don't go away are really going to be the topic of my second book, which the working title, I think it's going to end of it, is When the Shiny Wears Off. Okay.
Yeah.
When you know as much as you need to know, and this is still hard, what are you going to do? Because that's where it comes into this space of like, okay, how do I resource myself? But how do I begin to understand the patterns of my storms? Disorganization is harder than me. Like impulsivity is still one of my hardest storms.
Yeah.
I can interrupt and get on my wife's nerves at the worst of the times. And I don't mean to, but I can work to manage it. But so it doesn't go away. Well, this ongoing resource nature, right? Again, it's important to validate that you're not only going to have storms, they're going to be there throughout your life. You'll learn to manage the weather patterns of them.
Yes.
And you'll know what rain jacket to put on. You'll know what umbrella to grab that day.
Absolutely. And learning to be okay with that, I think, is huge. Right. Like it took me a long time when you were talking about this. I think you started saying like there's a disorganizational front coming through or something like that. I try really hard to stay on top of my office reasonably, reasonably. I'm all about functional organization. So my office is on the second floor of our home, not right inside the foyer on the other side of a glass door like my husband's is. Right. I don't have that office that you want, in your entrance. But every now and then it just it's like, excuse the expression, but it becomes a shit show. And I used to get upset with myself, and because I had created a project that I don't enjoy. Now I've made a mess, and that's become a project, and I hate cleaning up, all of that. Right. And then I realized, it took me a while, this is a pattern. Every time I have a new project at work or a new something I'm offering, or I'm going through a very busy time, I make a mess. So now part of the project completion is cleaning up the mess.
Yes.
And once I gave myself permission, not only gave myself permission to think of it that way, but really just realized this doesn't mean like you're a hot mess all the way around again. This just means that this is the pattern. This is the way the mess ebbs and flows, and it's okay.
Yes. And as you were saying earlier, you could probably pull that mess apart and find an enormous amount of creativity in that mess.
Yes.
That you needed to do it that certain way to let creativity flow, to put things together, to come to a resolute. There's a rhyme and a reason. This is what drives me crazy. People with ADD, they're like, well, I'm trying to write a paper. I'm trying to organize something. And they're like, well, I haven't gotten started. They feel so bad. I'm like, okay, now wait a minute. Have you thought about it? They're like, yeah, I've been thinking about it for 3 weeks. I said, so you're already in process.
Right.
You're in pre-organization thoughts. So tell me about those. They go, and they're like, what do you mean that's valuable? I'm like, oh, yes, you have your own process.
You're warming up. Yeah.
Yes. You're getting ready to take action.
Yeah.
It's not action time yet. We haven't hit, it's not camera go time yet.
Right.
But they don't realize that, right? That we have our own rhyme and reason in a way that makes sense to us as we're talking about.
Absolutely. And you've got to honor it.
And as we were talking about earlier, you have to empower it and have courage to say, no, this is how I do it. So for me with my office, it's about every 3 to 6 months. I just did a major declutter of my office, 40% of my clothes given away, cleared out a 40-year-old workshop.
Wow.
It's a major cleaning in June, and it was phenomenal now, but I'm almost in shock, right? Because it's so organized.
Right.
So I do have the rule, nothing on the floor in the office, nothing on the workshop table that I'm not working on. I've kept it for 3 weeks, but you can hear my hesitation, but it's like we do those things in resets, and understanding that they're there and they're not going to go away is okay.
And that it's okay. And it's not only okay, but it's to be expected.
Right. It's to be expected, and it's normal.
Yes.
And
It's normal for you.
It.
Yes.
Yeah. I have in my small 10 by 10 office here at my home.
The size of mine. Yeah.
I have 80 pieces of art in my office. Okay. Now, other people would be totally blown away. They're all original pieces. I've collected them over 30 years, and they're all
cool.
Right. They're perfect for me. Now, someone else might come in here and say, whoa, just too much. I'm like, no, I can tell you a story behind every piece in here. That's
they have
me.
Meaning. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Someone else who might get visually overstimulated and need a different environment in their office.
Yes.
And it's all okay.
It is. It really is, Lynn. And I think this is, but again, you can never hear it enough.
Yeah.
That the stress and the emotional and mental space is all about taking care of yourself. I talk about, the mind is a muscle. And it's one of the muscles that most people with ADD never relax. They never learn to relax that muscle because it's always on hyperdrive, right? We're always underactive in our evaluation. It's like, no, if you don't, what muscle in your body have you not relaxed?
Yes.
And so it's going to burn out. It's going to have problems. So learning to take care of yourself is such a critical factor. I say self-care is the best care, and it's the only care.
Yeah.
You just have to do it,
Absolutely. And that looks a little bit different for each one of us. So it's, that's part of that getting to know you, and, that's a different kind of resourcing, right? Knowing what you need to do to recharge, what really is effective for you, because what works for me, may make somebody else more stressed or not reset them.
Right. And that may change a year from now. We know that consistently inconsistent pattern.
Right. That's a given.
Oh my God, it's a given. And it just waxes and wanes, and it's like I talk about with exercise, right? I use a decathlon approach. You got to have 10 things you'd want to do at any given time so that your ADD mind can grab one of them, and I've been successful at exercising now for over 12, 13 years. But before then, it didn't help. I'd let my 18-year-old mental mind out in a CrossFit gym, and I would wind up hurting myself at 42 again. it's like
all or nothing, right?
Right. A walk around the block is still exercise.
It is. It is. There's so much of this is a game that's played between the ears. I often say what's going on, what's getting in your way, that's between your ears is the toughest nut to crack, but it's the most important nut to crack. This is all I could talk to you all day.
There's some great stuff. I know. It's just so much fun to talk to someone else who.
There's some really interesting stuff in there once you crack it.
Oh yeah. Really valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You've never met a nut like yourself, right?
Exactly. I will crack myself up just walking around, and I'll think to myself, if I had like a speech bubble over my head and people could see the full-on multi-sided conversation that's going on here as I work my way through this, it would be hysterical. It would also be a little bit embarrassing, but it would be hysterical.
It would. We would learn to laugh at ourselves.
Yes.
I had a final story I will tell. When I was about 50, I was going through Chicago, and a friend's daughter who was a dancer there, 28 years old, we were taking her out to dinner. We were driving, and I was making some strange joke, and I was laughing at myself. She looked at me and she says, "You're a 50-year-old man, and you're making jokes that are like 2-year-old jokes that you laugh at yourself." She's like, "What is going on?" I'm like, "That's my ADD. It's just who I am. I enjoy living life on life's terms. But for someone else who doesn't have it, they look at it and go, hey, it's who I am. I know my hair color, height, and weight. and I like who I am.
Yeah,
Makes a big
absolutely.
difference. Yeah, we could talk forever, Lynne, for sure.
That's huge. I love that. Well, tell our listeners one more time where they can learn more about you, get in touch with you.
Yeah, so James Ochoa, James and then OCHOA.com is my website. And my podcast is The Complex. It's a very funny radio narrative fiction theater, and Shiny Shorts is about storms of ADD and how to deal with them. Love what I do. I also have 2 6-week modules now, one in the fall, one in the spring, called Town Hall. It's a community I'm building for people to kind of keep honing their strategies. Once you've got them honed, it's nice to have a community to go back to.
Absolutely.
A couple times a year to kind of, I call it touchstone counseling. It's just really good way to kind of keep up with where, how your ADD works. But I really just love what I work, and I love that you do the work you do. And it's just like, it's so good to be able to talk to other folks who are helping people, because this is still, there's what, 70-80% of the people in the world who have this condition don't know they have it.
Absolutely. And they're walking around in pain and in mental and emotional distress. And we need to change that. We're getting there, getting better, but we've still got a lot of room to grow.
Got a lot of work for sure. We've always got a lot of work to do. So thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, James. And thank you all for listening. As always, I appreciate your attention. Please join us in the ADHD Support Talk Facebook group to have conversations, connect, share your thoughts, ideas, ask questions. Let Tara and I know what topics or guests you'd like us to have. And if you found the podcast helpful or you enjoy it, we would really appreciate it if you left us a 5-star review on iTunes, because the more 5-star reviews we get, the more people can find the podcast and get the help and support they need for their ADHD. Thanks again, James. Thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you next time on ADHD Support Talk.
Thanks so much.